This is Ray Stone, and I want to bring to your attention something that we have written about here at Stone and McCarthy Research, and it has to do with the impact of the mild winter on the economic data for the first quarter and what we might expect in the second quarter. With this particular video, what I hope to do is also to introduce April's weather. Now, to start off, it's worthwhile to reflect on just how extraordinary this winter was. And to do that, we used the Stone and McCarthy Weather Index. Now, what this weather index is basically a ratio of national average temperatures over national precipitation rates for each month. Now, these data are standardized to take account of the fact that it usually rains more in April than it does in June. They also are adjusted for normal seasonality, so we can effectively compare the weather in January with the weather in July. And this helps explain much of the fluctuation in economic data from month to month and from quarter to quarter. So just how extraordinary was the weather in the first quarter? To answer that question, again, we turn to the weather index, and the Q1 2012 SMR weather index had a reading of 117.7. Now 100 is normal, a normal amount of temperature relative to precipitation. So 117.7 is well above what is normal, and in fact it's the highest on record, and the record goes all the way back to 1895. The previous high was 113.7, so we're 4 points above that, and that was way back in Q1 of 1921. So we know that the first quarter weather was extraordinary. We saw better gains in retail activity. We saw significant gains in employment, particularly in weather-sensitive employment, in the earlier months of the quarter. So how does it look as we move into Q2? Well, here again, April weather is what we have on books so far for the quarter, and that was pretty good. In fact, the temperature for April was 55.7. That's the national average temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, and it was the second warmest April on record. So again, back to 1895, really quite extraordinary. The regional data shows that it was particularly warm in the center of the country, places like Texas and New Mexico, and in the upper part of the central part of the country, rankings of 112 and 107 out of a maximum of 118. And even the rest of the country, the West Coast and the East Coast, very warm readings of around 90 out of this possibility of 1 to 118 range, where 118 is the warmest. So quite extraordinary weather in April as well. The precipitation in April, however, was a bit mixed. It was a little bit drier on average than normal. The rating here was 41 on a scale of 1 being the driest and 118 being the wettest. So it's closer to the 1 than it is to the 118. But what we did see during the month of April was significant precipitation on the West Coast. And the West Coast is important because there's a lot of people who live on the West Coast. And California, for example, and the Great Northwest are states that create a lot of economic activity, a lot of employment, and so forth and so on. So while the overall number was for the country a little bit lower than the median, the rainfall in the West Coast should be a little bit of an economic detriment. The overall April weather index came in at a reading of 108.5, and this again is quite extraordinary. 100 is average, where you have a normal balance of temperatures and precipitation. But what's significant about the April reading is that it's down sharply from where we were both in the first quarter and where we were in March. The March reading was 118.7, so we're down 10.2 points. And this is a fairly large decline. So while the weather readings were very extraordinary in the first quarter, including March, we fell off that cliff to a still elevated landing, which remains well above normal, but it should have some economic payback associated with it. This last chart shows the change in the SMR weather index for previous Aprils, where we had large declines in the weather index from March. And what we see is in each one of these circumstances, we see a decline in weather-sensitive payrolls. That includes retail payrolls, construction payrolls, hospitality and leisure payrolls, etc. But we see a significant decline in each one of these months. Now, what we did here is we looked at the change in the weather index for between March and April, and we then looked at the trend in weather-sensitive payrolls in the prior 3 months and what the deviation from that trend was in March. But in each case, you can see that there was a significant downward deviation. In the case of 2012, the April payroll numbers, according to our accounting of weather-sensitive payrolls, they fell 35,000 from what was on track previously, which what it means is that these payrolls were actually up, but much less than they had been. The other thing we looked at, and we're eyeing this with regard to upcoming retail sales data, is we looked at other weather-sensitive activity. In this case, we looked at the building supply stores in the retail sales report. These are stores like hardware stores, but they also include the Home Depot, the Lowe's, and places like this. And what you see here again is in each circumstance where the weather index fell a lot between March and April, the sales of these stores fell considerably. In each case of the prior 3 circumstances where the drops were significant in the weather index, the decline in these sales exceeded $1 billion in each one of those months. So what is the bottom line here? The bottom line is that we saw perhaps better economic indicators or stronger pulse of economic indicators during the winter months into March, and during the second quarter we should see some payback. We don't think this payback will last indefinitely. As we go through our April and May, we suspect we will cleanse the data of whatever unusual boost there was in the first quarter. And as we move later into the second quarter and ultimately into the third quarter, unless we have some extraordinary weather in those months, we would expect to see a more trend-type behavior in the data.